None of us needs reminding about the sheer frustration and potentially devastating impacts of power cuts, not least after a week in which we reportedly flirted with stage 7 load shedding.
It's a scourge that touches every aspect of life, and now even death. Here's Claire.
Rolling electricity blackouts, disruptive, crippling for the economy, and for a man from Johannesburg, a horror story with unexpected twists and terrible consequences. 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀𝗶𝘆 knew that his elderly grandmother in the Free State was quite ill, that she was admitted to hospital. What he didn't know until only 2 days later was that she'd passed away. It was last April, the year in which Eskom implemented over 200 days of load shedding. How did you find out that she had passed away?
It's early Tuesday. But now you've money message ka Thursday. So I can't reach her na lebona. I still blame load shedding for the full because of hospital at 𝗃𝗃𝗃 doesn't have a backup generator.
What?
I'm telling you.
The hospital had no generator to keep the lights on. 𝗀𝗵𝗆 was in shock, but load shedding wasn't done with him. His grandmother's body was taken to a local funeral parlor where she'd stay until the Bulimi family could assemble back home for her funeral. But like for a growing number of death care providers, their undertaker battled to keep her body cold enough for long enough.
Nakong ya funeral stopo se tlohile ko hospital sa ya funeral parlor. Nako se tla funeral parlor this thing is load shedding. Then se like so wa bona so a se go tshwara ice because sina se tshula se le so go le mo pate nakong e so.
During the night, hours before taking it home, body fluid started dripping from his grandmother's casket.
Like maybe
With his grandmother's remains decomposing after a week, the undertaker warned the family not to hold the casket by the handles eaten away by body fluids, and definitely not to view the body.
So you're not learning rites ka this thing ya load shedding. Ka pata makrisa ka sharp like the way this thing got.
This year, Eskom has implemented load shedding every day so far, and for many undertakers, it's become an ordeal just to keep giving their customers what they need. Death is big business in South Africa. The funeral services industry generates a revenue of more than 7.5 billion rand every year. It's a thriving and highly competitive industry, but load shedding has thrown a spanner in the works, especially for small funeral businesses that have to fork out growing amounts of cash to keep generators running. It's 9 a.m. on a Monday at 𝗀𝗃𝗃 Funerals in Johannesburg. Apart from business running a little slow, the lights are on. Lawrence 𝗀𝗃𝗃 took over a thriving family business that was founded in the 60s. But these days, he feels like he's feeding all his profits into a generator.
So you've got to make sure that, the integrity of that body is kept. Because if the fridge is not working, that means it's going to decompose. So it's very important that we make sure that we always have constant power.
Operational costs have always been high, but the COVID pandemic hit Lawrence hard. Contrary to what people might imagine, it wasn't just a case of more deaths, more funerals, and more profits.
You had 1 or 2 members of the same family dying within a week or within a few days of each other. And they probably buried the first one decently, the second one, and the third one, there's no funds. And they will still come to you, and what do you do?
In a local death care market of about 70,000 small operators, only 10,000 legal undertakers generate most of the profits. Now add in a pandemic and load shedding that's seen generators meant for backup becoming the main power source. Load shedding has put the very viability of small businesses at risk.
We normally get 2,000 liters of diesel, and that will last us just around a month or 6 weeks if we are lucky. And we used to spend just under 30 grand for that. And now we're spending almost double.
The law says that funeral parlors must have a backup system, a generator on site to keep storage rooms cool in the event of load shedding. But with the rapidly rising cost of fuel, how long can that remain sustainable? 𝗀𝗲𝗯𝗶𝘀 is spokesperson for the National Funeral Directors Association.
A disaster would be an understatement. At 30 minutes notice, we are on stage 5. 30 minutes notice, we are on stage 6. And that meant that you are going without power for a number of hours. Put a strain on income.
Ironically, while operators fork out more of their own cash to keep going, families are opting for smaller burial packages. It's strangling even older and bigger franchises with much deeper pockets. Dove's head office supports independent franchises countrywide. CEO Jodine Smith.
We could live with stage 2, right? Because it was 2 hours of downtime. When we now start moving to 4 hours and 6 hours, we found that our business started shutting down. We had an effect on our phone lines. People couldn't call us. We had an increase in break-ins, and the branches were vulnerable.
Then, with generators running virtually all day, the cost of the diesel started spiraling. Last year, the company invested in a backup solution for all its branches.
That cost us up to 1.7 million. We have 128 branches across country. So it was a massive impact on us.
For many undertakers, it's a matter of pride to prepare the deceased for burial. An important moment for grieving families. But to manage costs, some are now asking families to bury their loved ones more quickly, at least within 4 days. That would never have worked for Tumelo's family. Load shedding disabled every institution he depended on to expedite the funeral.
ntho ya pele ntse ke etse go kopa permission from Spani for mosebetsi mo ke sebetsang teng gore no ke hlokalletswe. So mosebetsing ba batla proof ya go hlokalletswe, which is death certificate. So death certificate a ba khona e fumana that side because of load shedding go home affairs. Be ke tloa ke ya di insurance-eng ke batla lo claim, so nka se claim without death certificate.
Without a death certificate to submit for an insurance claim, the family had to scrape together their savings to conduct the funeral. Tumelo would only get the death certificate the week after her burial, and by then he was facing a disciplinary at work for leaving without submitting it.
We do like body after but now
even if families would like to bury their loved ones sooner, they won't be able to do that because everything else, the admin of making sure that your loved one gets that dignified funeral, is also delayed by load shedding. So it's a knock-on effect that I would never have anticipated. The days following death are sacred, punctuated by rituals that give the bereaved closure and pave the way into the afterlife for the deceased. Dr. 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 studies the significance of these practices.
Preservation of the body, integrity of the body, extremely important, which is why you have these cleansing rituals where, for example, the body will be cleansed using special medicine plants. And the idea here is to empower the spirit of the deceased.
Since the ramifications of not giving the deceased a dignified send-off can be dire, some who can afford it go for embalming, a chemical treatment that delays decomposition and costs between 1,500 and 3,000 rand.
I've heard that other African countries like Kenya, they provide embalming services. You know, people embalm the body, and apparently the government pays for it. So you see that. I think the government can play a big role in terms of helping to solve this issue, so that it's not just the burden that is carried by the funeral parlor.
To combat outages, the government this week announced a tax incentive for solar roof panels. But Dudu Makano and Lawrence Konyana say that after investing so heavily in generators, the cost of solar, even subsidized, is way too high. And it's too late for many, like Tumelo, haunted by the memory of his grandmother's shambles of a funeral.
Sometimes I like, maybe get on for a late. Because I feel like I'm floppy.
Thanks for watching. Have you heard about our new podcast? It's like Carte Blanche, but without the Sunday blues. Find Carte Blanche the podcast with new episodes uploaded weekdays on all major podcast platforms. Unique stories, unique perspectives, wherever you go.